My name is Amy Smith, and this is my final presentation for the Anthropology 242 class at the University of Alaska Fairbanks in spring semester of 2014. My focus was on the language integration in the Alaska education system. Alaska has the sixth largest overall population of indigenous people in the United States, according to the 1999 U.S. Census. Alaska Natives total 16.4% of the state's population and 23% of its school population. This 23% of Native students in schools have the potential to speak any one of the more than 20 documented Native languages from around Alaska. In 2001, nearly 60% of Alaska Native students attended school in rural and remote communities, where K-12 school enrollments range from just a handful of students with one teacher to 500 students with many teachers. The remaining 40% of Alaska Native students are in urban schools, where the majority of the student enrollment is Caucasian. The linguistic and cultural context of Alaska has always provided challenges for education, but has also given opportunities for schooling that are often unique. Even though the educational context of Alaska has gone through many unusual twists and turns over the years, it is still safe to say that learning in a student's first language is easier than learning in a second or less understood language. In 2001, the United States Department of Education, through the Office of Educational Research and Improvement, allowed a grant to be written, and the Secretary announced a priority for the American Indian and Alaska Native Education Research Grant Program to fund research that will evaluate the role of Native language and culture in the development of educational strategies for improving achievement and academic progress of American Indian and Alaska Native students. This is according to the Federal Register of 2001. When this grant was written, the government stated that they supported any research on education and developmental activities that improved educational enhancement of the Native people of Alaska. This is no small task, but through the funded research, United States policies on language arts in the educational system have changed. Not only did the grant look at research possibilities, but it also considered the cultural and language barriers that indigenous people face when trying to get a proper education through westernized cultures. The grant also took a look at education in rural areas versus urban. Due to environment, these areas can and will pertain different educational aspects. It also took a look at educational leadership and how it needed to include educators as well as the village elders, not only to teach the academics, but also give strong ties with culture and language. One change that was allowed by this grant was to allow applicants to address language or culture, or both elements. Culture and language are very integrated. Language can be viewed as a verbal expression of culture. It is used to maintain and convey culture and cultural ties. In all cultures, the stories that are told and the things that are said are the things that are taught. They are the things that are literally the culture of the people. Language and communication is exactly what maintains a culture through the generations. Alaska educators understand that language and culture are closely related. And because they understood the importance, the Alaska Standards for Culturally Responsive Schools was created and adopted into the educational system in 1998. It states, "The standards have been developed by Alaska Native educators to provide a way for schools and communities to examine the extent to which they are attending to the educational and cultural well-being of the students in their care. These cultural standards are predicated on the belief that a firm grounding in the heritage language and culture indigenous to a particular place is a fundamental prerequisite for the development of culturally healthy students and communities associated with that place, and thus is an essential ingredient for identifying the appropriate qualities and practices associated with culturally responsive educators, curriculum, and schools." These standards are guidelines that allow educators to examine what they are doing to attend to the cultural well-being for the students. For example, one cultural difference between Westerners and Native Alaskans is eye contact. When a native Alaskan child isn't looking at his or her teacher, that doesn't mean that they aren't listening. Native children are taught that it is rude to stare at adults, whereas in Western cultures it is a sign of disrespect when you do not have good eye contact with the speaker. Once a teacher understands this simple difference, they can then take different measures to make sure that native students are learning just as much as westernized students. Through shifting pedagogy policies, teachers and administrators can better relate to and understand the difference among cultures and the people. These Alaska Standards for Culturally Responsive Schools does not just apply to Alaska culture, however. If you read through the standards, which is quite extensive, it can help a teacher on how to teach and maintain a multicultural classroom. Another policy that was changed through the 2001 legislation was that educational leadership will be added to the listing of factors that may contribute to positive academic achievement or social development. In the Alaska Fairbanks School District, they have set aside a special classroom where students can take field trips to learn about Alaska culture. They call this simply the Alaska Room. As soon as students enter the room, they are offered a type of clothing from the different parts of Alaska. For example, the girls are offered a kuspuk that is worn by Aleut women in central Alaska. There are great big maps on the walls to show the students where their particular piece of clothing is worn, and they are educated on the types of dances and craftsmanship that the native cultures do in those areas. In addition, the students learn about the traditional ways of life for each group of natives and are told stories of old by elders that are visiting. This is just one way that the public school system is trying to integrate cultural knowledge to the urban students that may not know very much about Alaska and its cultures. For students that are from the villages that may only know a little English or have a better understanding of things through their traditional language, the school offers programs under the title ELL programs, or English Language Learners. By understanding the culture of that each student comes from, a teacher can better educate the whole class. Culture has a strong influence in the style of communication. Teachers must be aware of many manifestations of culture in language. This is part of the research done by Smith et al. In 2012. By understanding how each student is affected by his or her culture, as stated above with the example of eye contact, a teacher can better educate their students. In the lower Kuskokwim School District of Alaska, the Z. John Williams School in Napaskiak, the curriculum allows for every Wednesday afternoon that the elders of the village come in and teach the students the village history, traditions, and other highlights of their community life. Not only does this allow teachers time to prepare for the following week's lessons, but gives the students the opportunity to learn their own language and traditions. This program is closely related to LINK, or Language in the Classroom programs. Programs such as this hold a philosophy that language learning should occur in the child's most natural environment and in conjunction with other content being learned. This is also from Smith in his 2012 research. By inviting the elders into the schools each week, these students are learning in their most natural state. Even when learning in a different language, it is easier to remember if you start with things you do and know very well. Such was the case with a group called the Siulistit Group. The Siulistit Group was formed under a man named John Antonin of Southwest Regional Schools. This group wanted to attack the dilemma of providing formal schooling but maintaining local language, culture, and community factors. They decided to look at the local fish camps to provide an incorporated link with language and culture to math and science. The group has explored ways in which Yupik pedagogical practices can support traditional values and content yet meet standard educational objectives. The look at the Siulistit group was by the research from Lipka and McCarty in 1994. This was quite a huge task, yet through working together with the elders of the community, they were able to create a pedagogy that met the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics standards. Through the Yupik traditions of song, dance, and drumming, they found ways to effectively teach numeration systems, place values, measurement, symmetry, and patterns. Through education, it's important to realize each student comes from a different background. There is different culture everywhere. And when a child learns new concepts in a knowledge base they already know, the new concept is better understood and the child can retain the information longer. When a pedagogy allows for the students to learn as much as they can in their own cultural linguistics, the students learn a mutual respect for one another's cultures and language. Their understanding of the core curriculum has the potential to be learned more fully and deeply, and they begin to see that every culture and language has meaning and similarities in what they learn. They just learn it in different ways. Essentially, we are teaching the students to be more accepting of others, and we begin to prepare a foundation for a multilateral partnership amongst our growing youth.